Yes. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to EduTALK. It's a real pleasure to have you on with us this evening as our viewers. And EduTALK is a weekly virtual talk show created out of the need for a global learning community. And we focus on topics in education that directly impact Caribbean nations and Jamaican nationals right across the globe. EduTalk features teachers, principals, and administrators, business leaders, as well as dignitaries who share their expertise on critical topics facing education today, with a common goal of moving education forward and our children upwards. Now, this evening, as our guest, we have on our program Professor Rosalie Hamilton. I keep on messing up with your name. Rosalie Hamilton, and she's the founding director of the Institute of Law and Economics, as well as the co-chair of the Advocates Network in Jamaica. Welcome, Dr. Hamilton, or Professor Hamilton. Let me get Miguel Barker. Dr. Barker, just say a few things as my co-host, and then we get over to our wonderful guest here and get into our program.
Oh, no, thanks for setting the stage, so to speak, with your introduction. And I'm certainly delighted to be here today just to talk to Dr. Hamilton about this topic, which as I, in the shadow of what is to be coming in the next few weeks, it is an important topic that at this juncture, I think it's the right time for island nations and Commonwealth nations to consider. It's the right time. In fact, it would have been a great time to have simultaneously allowed this conversation to happen and culminate on this day, but that's not where we are. But yeah. Dr. Hamilton, I know that you have a lot to share, so thanks. Great to meet you, and I'm sure we'll have a good conversation as we progress to this. So great to have you on the show.
Yes. Thanks for having me.
Good. So, Professor Hamilton, you are also with the many things that you're doing, such as the co-chair advocates network, and that's a big deal because I read the communications that you're sending out, as well as you're a columnist too for the Gleaner, and you write significantly on this topic of the journey of Jamaica towards a republic. But give us an idea of the work that you're doing, personally, the work in general, right across the platforms.
Well, I think the first thing that we have agreed as a network is the need for public education. And this is obviously relevant to your talk, EduTalk. Education is key because we're talking about a very profound journey. This is not a new journey. This is a journey that has started since emancipation, right? It is about the opportunity for the first time after centuries of enslavement and colonization that we began to see the glimmer of hope that we could achieve freedom, self-determination, and we can begin a process to regain our humanity. That's the journey. And I think we have to see this republic as part of that long historical journey. Independence was a disappointment, the expectation that finally we could have gotten rid of the colonial burden that we carried for decades, was that vision was not quite realized. We perpetuated a king, a head of state. And more importantly, we perpetuated the institutions that were created, that was set up to perpetuate the enslavement and colonization of our ancestors. That's the reality. And so 60 years later today, we still have a head of state, despite the fact that we're only one of 14 countries across the world. 15th, one is England, right? That has the British king as head of state. And so we are going to leave that process, and our prime minister has announced that. Real question for us now is, where are we going? What kind of republic are we going to create?
Yes.
And I think the conversation for me starts right there. And that's where I think the public education is critical. You know, what does this republic mean? What
Yeah.
will it mean for Jamaicans?
All right, Dr. Hamilton, I think you've hit on a point that I'd like to just kind of wind it back a little just so that we can dig into it a little. So I have been keeping an eye on the conversation in the Jamaican media scape, so to speak, and that includes the social media as well as the what we'll call the formal traditional media. The issue that I am seeing, though, is the idea of Jamaica becoming a republic and the issue becoming politicized. Almost as if, so how do you believe we should be approaching this to ensure that the conversation doesn't seem as if it's a JLP or a PNP issue, but a national issue? You can tell me if I'm misreading some of the tea leaves that I'm seeing, but I get the feeling that there's this idea that it could be seen as almost a political football when it shouldn't really be. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, in fact, the joint statement that we published just this week with the Jamaica Council of Churches, one of the issues that we put on the table was the fact that we want the timeline, the timetable for this Constitutional Reform Committee to be in no way tied to the plans for the next general election. And I think that if that's done, what you've said is likely to become a reality. It would be unfortunate because we have an issue in which both our major political parties agree that it is time to move the king as head of state. There may be disagreement about the nature of the republic that we want to establish. And that to me is not very clear. Does the government of the day and the opposition clearly want to create a state in which the people of Jamaica are sovereign? And if that is their goal, what exactly are the provisions that we're going to put in place to ensure that that happens? That's the conversation. That's the real conversation we need to have.
Yeah, and we are nowhere near that conversation at the moment.
Well, you know, I can say for many Jamaicans, people are still at the stage of, you know, who is the king? What is he doing for us? You know, what is this republic? And all of this not look like it going to affect my bottom line. Like, we really not have time for this. You know, I spoke to my hairdresser just 2 days ago, and she said to me, what thing are you talking about? And I said, the king head of state. She says, what does he do? I don't know anything about it. So there's that level of conversation of really being tuned out what all of this is. And for those of us who are tuned in, there's a lot of confusion about what exactly this process should entail and it does entail.
Yeah. What does it pertaining to the background to all of this too? And I'm taking it from Miguel's point of view to pull back a little bit. What caused this projection towards removing the Governor General?
Well, remember, this is an old conversation that we've had, in fact, since independence. There are forces in the society that wanted to sever. There are countries like Dominica in the Caribbean that it severed the arrangement with the king, the monarch as head of state, the queen at the time, at independence. Because it was seen as part of this process, decolonization. And independence was just another step. Now, we kept, for what all the reasons that the historians can tell you best, why we ended up with retaining the king, but it's consistent with the views of the founding fathers. Norman Manley made it very clear that, you know, the constitutional arrangement was among the best in the world, and that 90% of what we have, we had prior to independence. Now, I want Jamaicans to reflect on that statement, because what he was saying at the time is this: the colonial government, led by the monarchy and the British government, at that time, prior to independence, ran the country, pulled laws in place, the highest laws, the constitutional arrangements in place to perpetuate a system of slavery and colonization. That's the legal framework we had.
Servitude.
Mhm.
Servitude,
Right,
yes.
exactly. And it served the interests of the British and the elite of the country, plantation owners. Now, when you move to independence and those laws persist, and the institutions that flow from that, the way you structured the parliament, the way you structure the legislature and so on. In fact, if you look at our our constitution, there's an explicit chapter on the executive, but you see nothing about the legislature. The legislature are our representatives, the people's representative. There's nowhere in our constitution where the word the people turns up. Unlike the Americans that starts their constitution with we the people. We don't have that. So we've inherited this constitution 60 years later. The only thing we changed was chapter 3, our Charter of Rights. So the infrastructure, the legal framework that runs Jamaica is a colonial one.
So
now that's what we have to change.
If I'm understanding your position on this, then is independence and all of the, well, certainly the baggage that was carried from independence. Would you say that this movement towards Jamaica becoming a republic is more an evolution of that independent status, that more and more an independent nation, and not so much a break, but more to do with an evolution of Jamaica as a 60-year-old country? Is that a
yes?
I suppose the second level. Yes, sorry.
No, I think it's a good way to think about it. I think we ought not to look outside. We can look outside, of course, for lessons. But I think if we look at our own historical journey, that's the best way to frame it. I actually use the analogy of building a house. When the British came, they built a house for themselves, right? And they kept the top floor with all the space and all the issues, the land and so on was theirs. And they kept all of us at the bottom. And we were the servants. And we did what they wanted to do, right? And the laws were the rules that shaped how we all live together in that house. Now, today, in 2023, we recognize that more of us want to get to the top. The top cannot hold all of us within this house that was constructed. So we now have to rebuild that house. The house was never constructed for all of us to rise to the top. It was never the intent. And so that's where we are.
I like your house analogy. I'm going to stretch it a little bit further. Because I'm wondering if when we think about that house that you talk about that they built, they actually occupied the bottom floor. And in the sense that everything you wanted to do on the top floor, you have to use the bottom floor and ask permission to go upstairs and ask, you have to come through the door. And I'm wondering if the analogy, in the way that the laws were kept in place, we had to, everything we were doing, because if anybody who's down here really is who control the house, otherwise you're going to use ladders.
I mean, we can play around the analogy, but I think the idea is really,
but I think the point you're making is
that was not constructed in our interest. That's the bottom line.
100%.
We have to rebuild it.
Here is a question though, because you talk about your hairdresser, and the reality of it is that for the person on the ground, the question they have is, well, you know, I need this and I need that. I need to, buy a pair of shoes for my child, or I need to get school fees or school registration fees paid, or bus fare or lunch. And this big conversation that matters to the certain people in Jamaica, highbrow people who don't have to think about dinner for tonight. This Republic conversation means nothing to me. What do you have to say that they could walk away from this conversation and say, you know what, actually, I didn't think of it this way?
All right. Well, what I would say is this: if you want to be part of rebuilding that house, right? The house are popped down right now, and the house are leak.
Yeah.
And if you understand that you can fix it in a way that can protect you, that can give your children hope, that you can live in dignity like everybody else in this country, then you first of all have to recognize you have to be part You have to play an active role in building that house. Nobody's going to build it for you. Because if you leave others to build it for you, they may not build it in your interest.
Mhm.
So that's the first point.
Yeah.
Second point is once you actively engage and we all can create an arrangement in which we jointly make decisions that represent our interests, then you get a chance to make decisions that can affect your life directly. For example, we can put arrangements in place where we, the Jamaican people, have a direct say about how we spend a portion of our budget. Remember, it is our money, right? Now, if we had a chance to shape how the money is spent, would we shape it in our collective interest? Well, again, it depends on how many of us are around the table, how we are prepared to work together to create a kind of consensus that says, you know what, you see this money, right now for years we've been struggling with getting a good school, good teachers to make sure our children are properly educated. Because we know that for them to get a good education, they have to travel miles,
Yeah.
right? And we need a proper school here. So we're going to take that, all of us agree, we're going to take that money and we're going to build a school, right? Or we want to create jobs because right now we don't have decent jobs and we know the talent that exists in our community. So we're going to take funding and we're going to do that. No, that kind of conversation in my mind, once Jamaicans understand that it is possible to put in your constitution participatory budgeting. 5 countries in the world have it. In fact, the first country that did it, Brazil, they created that. They invented this idea that we all should get involved in shaping a budget, and they've put it in their constitution. Something we can do.
Yeah.
So the Jamaicans who are saying, boy, I don't see the relevance, I say to them, get involved, start there. Begin to ask questions. That's what the Advocates Network decided to do. We have a campaign right now called Citizen Participation. And it simply starts with get in a group. It could be your family members, 2, 3 people, and start the conversation.
Yeah.
And then we take it from there.
That was my question too, because I noticed you're right. You're right in the Gleaner. And when Barker mentioned the common people like your hairdresser and so on, I'm thinking if a lot of people don't read so much the articles that are coming out in the newspapers. They listen to TikTok videos and Facebook and Instagram more than anything else. So I'm thinking, and in small communities in Jamaica, we normally get our news from our neighbor and, you know, some little sus or gossip that is going around. How, with the Advocates Network, how can it move into communities where the common people can get it? When you mention become a part of it, you know, how is the communication and the information getting to those common people? Is it through the school? Are we influencing the school to take part in this, and the church system and community groups? How is it working? Where we move from the article with the content of the articles that we're writing to the common people?
We're using all of those methods, every one of them. Thank God for social media.
Yeah.
And thank God for your program, because your program is part of that mechanism. We have to talk to everyone, including Jamaicans in the diaspora. We're of the view that we can't do this without our brothers and sisters, our uncles, our aunt, our grandmother, grandfather, all of the family in foreign. We're very clear about that. And so our Advocates Network includes members of the diaspora, and they are actively working with us in rolling this campaign out. So yes, we use all methods. We have a collaboration right now with the Jamaica Council of Churches. On Tuesday, we will be at the Bethel Baptist Church in the Halfway Tree area and Crossroads. And we will be talking to members of the church, and of course, everybody. It will be online, so it will be accessible. Some of what we've done already is on TikTok. So we're using all means, and we absolutely need the help of our diaspora who can help us to get the word out.
We're going to come
in
back.
many ways.
We're going to come back to the diaspora because we want to talk about people in the diaspora a little bit longer. But talk about the people in Jamaica and around Jamaica, in the Caribbean region, and they're Jamaicans. And some of them, when you talked earlier on, you said that a Jamaican might say, how will I benefit from that? You know, how will all of this benefit me when I need things right now and I don't need to focus on that? What do we say to people like that? Because when I traveled to Jamaica too and the Caribbean, I said to people that we really need to make this work. Like, we need to become a republic. We need to govern ourselves. We need to become independent. You know, the true essence of independence for ourselves and self-governance. And people will say, but we're not ready for that yet. You know, why not just do what we are doing now, build our family, build our community, and then leave politics out of this, you know, the corruption and all of that. And it's a lot of convoluted problems that they're bringing up that even they exist, but it's not a part of the conversation. We need to focus on moving the country forward. What do we say to people like those who are not even on the fence? They're over on the other side of the fence.
Yes.
Before Dr. Hamilton responds, I want to add something so she can
Yeah.
think of that as well. Because when we think of republic as against, we call it a parliamentary democracy at the moment, right? And with the Queen as our king as a head of state. A lot of people will say one question, and this is not coming from, let's say, the man on the street, but a man who have been on the street, is the idea of what is it that we gain through a republic that we cannot do now with the laws that we have in our land? So these are the kind of questions that people would ask who understand the conversation. Because the first part of it is that the man on the street, I mean, Jamaica is a country where only 38 to 40% voting on elections. So this is never going to be a major, you know, things get done with a minority sanctioning who runs the country. So I'm just wondering how the network is working on even the people who needs to be informed, the man who is educated, because that's a part of this, a big part of it. Like, how do we get them to understand, like, the benefits that you would say would be derived? You know, what is different? Like, how would we do things differently when we are a republic as against when?
Yeah.
At the moment, what is different, you know?
There's several questions there. There's several questions. Let me start with Dwayne's point about the naysayers and the individuals who are on the other side.
Yeah.
Our campaign of citizen participation is to encourage all citizens of Jamaica to get involved, to come on our side, meaning get in the conversation. That's our side, getting in the conversation. Because we have views. All of us ought to have views. But we're not saying come and join our view. We're saying come join the conversation, because you're absolutely right. It's the first step. If you stay outside, somebody will build that house for you and you may get left out. That's the point. They may left you out. So you need to have your voice in there. So that's the first point. And therefore, if you're not involved in the conversation, I can't help you. Because the truth is, if you can't see that as a citizen, you own Jamaica. Jamaica belongs to you, nobody else. And you must act as with the responsibility of ownership. When we own things, we take care of it. We don't allow somebody else to take care of it for us. If you're not there, there's very little that we can do, because we encourage you as a Jamaica to be a owner, take responsibility. Now that you're part of the conversation, we have to start the conversation at several levels. You know, some of us need to understand what a republic is. And I start there because I think for all of us, including many of us who are tertiary educated and have never done politics or studied the Constitution or law, are also confused. You know, what is this republic? And there are many different forms of republic. Remember, we have at our disposal now that we never had 50 or 100 years ago, an internet. Yeah. So we can easily research the many different conceptions of a republic. I start there because when I listen to the conversations, I hear people talking about an American model of a republic, right? Where we elect our president separate from the head of our head of government, for example. So those are some of the issues there. There are all these views. I try to keep it very simple. The definition and meaning of the word republic is rooted from the Latin word res publica, a public thing. When you think about that in the context of our history, we can easily understand that we had a country, a house, so to speak, that was owned by somebody else. It was owned by a few, the monarch and their people. Now, if we're talking about owning the house publicly, all of us own it, that's where we're moving to. A house, a country that belongs to all of us that we take ownership for. So that's one. Another important concept is this idea that your voice matters. This is the idea that power is in your hands. If you own this house, if you own Jamaica, you have the power. That's the concept of people's sovereignty. Now, we need to translate these ideas, these ideals, just like a democracy. Democracy is an ideal, it's not a destination. You don't change the king and become a republic tomorrow. Other countries have done that. But it's meaningless because you've moved one person and you've left all the structures in place. So you kick out the king out of the house, and then the same old house that are popped down is left, right? And people still can rain come through and all kind of things are gone. And what have we achieved? Now, the average Jamaican understands that. That's why they're asking the question, how, when we rebuild this house, how will it help? But they have to see that they have to be involved in building. No, when we begin to have that conversation, that we all have to get involved in building this republic, then we begin to say, what are the things we have to change? And I suggest, and those of us in the Advocates Network that are watching this closely, feel that we have to look very closely at this issue of the powers that is now in the hands of the executive. Let me make this point. When we took all the powers from the king and we pretty much kicked them out, although pictures and the figurehead there in the house, head of state, but the power left at independence, right? We gave that power to the prime minister and the cabinet. That's what we did.
The cabinet, the executive.
Yes, we didn't share that power to the people. And so they simply took over the top part of the house, as I framed the analogy, right? And continue to run it. The same old down house. No, we are saying in 2023, it's time to rebuild that house. It's time to change the relation. We can't concentrate power at the top. Yes. Because what we've seen over time is that is used in the interest of a few, not in the interest of a majority. Yeah. So now we have to say, let's look again at the relationship between the executive and the legislature. We vote our reps to represent us in parliament. When they go to parliament, do they really speak for all of us? You ask the average Jamaican and they'll say no. They really are more speaking to the political parties and their interests. And they're following the party leader's line. Dominantly, that's the case. You have a few exceptions. But the dominant way we run parliament is that the executive dominates, the cabinet decisions dominate. There's no effective oversight in what takes place in the executive. So we have, for example, these institutions that investigate contracts and how money is spent and so on. They go to these parliamentary committees and get stuck. Yes. You see very little coming out of that. So there's no effective oversight of executive decisions. We have to change all of that. And we have to get more arrangements in place in the House and in the Senate that represents the voice of the Jamaican people. That's what is needed.
It sounds like so you certainly one of the goals is a redistribution of power. It sounds to me like one of the goals. It doesn't necessarily represent an outcome that must come through a republic, certainly. And while I am a strong advocate that Jamaica needs to stand on its own feet and severing itself from the connections to the Commonwealth and to the, in terms of as an evolution, and that's the way that I think of it. Yeah. I'm mindful that there's a major mistrust of leaders, and whosoever become a president or whatever they are called will be the leader, and a mistrust in any new system, Yeah, certainly. We do have voter apathy, meaning even if there is a referendum, we might not have a majority that get involved in that. Yeah. We also have whether we had a queen or a king or the plantocracy, we do have a vested interest of people who have the power to put people on committees to ensure that what remains remains and there's no maybe redistribution of wealth. So that is maybe the landscape that we're operating in. So I suppose I can put it back to you now in terms of one, you started off talking about the government of Jamaica at the moment making it a formal statement to say that we are beginning this process. Where exactly, in terms of I know your work has always been there and in a maybe almost an advocacy role, but in terms of the formal process to reaching this end state of our republic, where exactly is your understanding that we are?
Yeah, the timeline.
So we have set up a constitutional reform committee that was announced on March the 22nd. And this is an advisory body that is going to advise the government as to the procedure and how to take us to this republic. There is a discussion about phases, and I fully agree with that idea that we have to phase it because it's a lot. It's very complicated. And the very first and most important phase is a phase that ought to start with public education.
Yeah.
We were very disappointed that an announcement was made on April 14th that decisions have been made. And that is what led to a lot of reactions about where are we? How are we getting involved? My own view is that if we are serious about creating a republic in which the people of Jamaica are sovereign, then the first announcement ought to be when the public education starts and how the Jamaican people will get involved in shaping this republic. What's the mechanism? Are we going to do town hall meetings? Will we create this public consultation? Are we going to do online polling? What is the mechanism? To date, nobody's clear about that. We've seen one public consultation in Montego Bay that took place this week, April 26th. And there are still questions, are we going to see more? Having made the announcement, the minister said she wants the bill tabled in Parliament next month. So another question we are asking is, will the public education process and consultations take place within a month? We're also mindful of the fact that there is from 2005, we've put a public consultation code in place in the country. That public consultation code makes it very clear and defines public consultation as an exchange of information and ideas between affected people and interested people, and that the decisions must be made not after, but before. The consultation must be done before, not after the decisions. So this is where we are now. We're in this conversation about how are you making decisions, and we've not yet been consulted, discussion, public education, and so on. And so we're not clear about the timeline going forward. If we listen to the government, the bill is going to be tabled next month. And once it's tabled, then there is a timeline in the Constitution that will take us 9 to 10 months. It will take time to go through the process because of the stages that the Constitution have defined.
Okay.
So that's the best I can say at this point, because we as advocates are saying we need to do more. We are in fact holding a conversation, a discussion with Jamaicans to encourage them to become more active and more engaged in this process. On May 6th, the very day that you, Dr. Bartlett, and others may be celebrating the coronation of the king. But we will not be celebrating any coronation. We, in fact, will be talking about the serious business of how we reform our constitution and how we create a new republic.
Professor Hamilton, it seems like we need consistent educational sessions with communities right across Jamaica. It needs to be ongoing, consistent. People going in, get this energy flowing throughout the country to get people to become aware, because they're the ones going to vote anyway.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Can I suggest that, Dr. Dice, that
Yeah.
your program becomes an excellent vehicle for that?
Yeah,
You are about education, and therefore just devote half an hour, 15 minutes of your program every week, every month, whenever. And just say, this is discussion time about the Constitution. This can be done. Again, if we see ourselves as owners of Jamaica with the responsibility to shape a Jamaica we want, then we can't wait for government to do the public education. That's why we started last year.
Right.
As you know, we
Yeah.
have been doing online engagements. We have no budget. We only have energy. We only have our own expertise and understanding of the issue, and we're doing what we can. And so we encourage members of the diaspora, anyone who is supportive of this issue, to support us. And there are many of us who are prepared to come on this program, other programs, to talk and let us get involved in the education process. Importantly, there are many things to know about this process. Many of us are engaged in the process and we've never read the Constitution.
Exactly.
So just a simple understanding of what the Constitution is and what provisions we need to look at. Why is very important.
Yeah, Dice, I know we're going to wrap up. I just wanted it's more
Come
of a
on,
summary
ask.
point, my observation on this.
Yes.
And then I don't even think my point here is though that it's clear that the government is handling the implementation process, and something as bipartisan as this and as impactful in terms of the maturity of the country, and with the mistrust that people have on both sides of each other, I do believe that following the announcement, rather than an advisory body, it would have meant that the next stage, the announcement or the advisory body would have been saying to the government, these are the people, having looked through the country, these are the groups, these are the organizations that will now take charge of the process. Because for me, it sounds almost, I'm going to say even almost like you're running through an obstacle course here when the government takes charge of a process like this, because ultimately it will be viewed as political. And for me, what you're doing is almost being undermined if you're taking a nationalist view of it. Let's look at it as a country. The feeling I get is that if the minister of, and I'm assuming this is the minister of foreign affairs who might have been maybe, who tabled this? Was it?
It's the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs.
Okay, so Malahoo Foot, yeah?
Fort, yes.
So and it rests in that department, but I think that department would be taking advice from a body for this to work in a non-partisan way. I'm worried about that, even though, I'm worried about that because I think it could create more problems than it solves. And as you said, they're making decisions in the executive and then sharing that out as a national news. And then people are like, hey, I thought we would be consulted. So thanks for your time. I know that this topic is one that we'll come back to many times, Dr. Dice. And I suppose the next part of this conversation where we meet again would be to see how far we have traveled or whether there has been any listening. But this has to be non-partisan. This has to be separate from any arm of government if the education process is to be successful. We can have a republic, but we can still have a republic that is equally politically illiterate as when we're under or we can have one that is awakened and fully understanding of what a republic can do. Because obviously if our people aren't educated in how a republic works, then they will not be able to derive the benefits of a republic and will be in the same position as they are now. So
absolutely,
that's just where I am with that thought. But thanks. It's really an enlightening conversation.
Thank you.
Really also want to say thanks and express gratitude for the work that your organization is doing without funding to educate and maybe to inspire people to be part of the educational and electoral process, because ultimately that's what we need in order to have the country that we all want and believe we can have.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, the diaspora really need to, we need to do more in the diaspora. And we're gonna do more because this really is an important issue. Yeah, Professor Hamilton, thank you so much for coming on, and we're gonna see you on Thursday, this Thursday, with our forum, getting Jamaica towards a republic and the implications for the citizenry of Jamaica, and even the Caribbean too. It's gonna impact the Caribbean as well. And so thank you so much, and we will see you later this week.
Thank
Okay.
you so much for having me.
Have a great,
Thanks
great.
for coming.
Yeah,
Amazing.
thank you. Viewers, thank you so much for being on. And we will see you next week with another episode of EduTalk. Walk good, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.